Oh, here we are back in Tom's basement and a couple of projects going on. The subject of this video is that fuselage there, but I've also got this 3-meter Fox I just bought that I'm getting ready. I think it's ready to fly. I have the receiver mounted, a couple of other things done to it, and all of the servos adjusted to neutral. So I think and it's bound, and I've checked everything and it all works. So I think the only thing that's left is to take it out to the field and get some help launching it, because what I was told was from the guy that I bought it from, who has flown one of these, is that if you want to launch this yourself, you can, but when you hit full throttle, you better be ready to launch, because it's going to launch itself. It's going to take off and go. You can't hold it with just one hand. So I'll probably get somebody to help me the first time I launch it, and we'll see how that goes. But it's definitely a beautiful airplane. The FMS did a great job of putting all this package together. It looks good, seems to be pretty sturdy. It's going to be easy to transport because the tail comes apart, but that's a subject for a later video. Now, this video is all about this fuselage replacement on my Timber Evolution. So I'm going to show you the old fuselage and the new one, and why the whole darn thing has to be replaced, which is going to take some time. It's not difficult, but it's very time and labor intensive to swap everything out from an old Timber Evolution fuselage to a new Timber Evolution fuselage, which was kindly supplied by Horizon Hobby after I sent them a picture of what happened, and you'll see what I mean. I'm going to stop here, take the camera off the tripod, and go take a look at the old timber fuselage and see what the problem was. Here we are. This is the old fuselage, and if you own a timber, I think you can see the problem. Right here is supposed to be your motor mount, and that motor mount's not there. It came off in flight at full throttle, pulled the wires off from the ESC wires off, and vanished into some deep dark woods full of poison ivy. And I looked for it with my drone. I looked for it outside of those woods, could not find it. Notified Horizon Hobby of this problem, which seems to have happened to quite a few people. Certainly not everybody, but quite a few have. It's a very popular airplane, and untold thousands of them have been sold. So let's go take a look at, well, before we do that, let's talk about what it's going to take. First of all, starting at the front, the ESC's got to come out. The receiver and servos and servo rods all have to come out. The GPS has to come off. Back behind there, those female plugs have to come out. And then, of course, the horizontal stabilizer. So we got to take all this apart, hook it all back up, put the motor back on, the rest of the motor mount, everything forward, cowling, prop, spinner, maybe a few other little pieces I've forgotten. Oh, the prop mount in front. Some of those parts I have, some of them I don't. But what I've got enough right now to put everything together absent the spinner. And we'll be going through that process. So here is the new fuselage right here. There's the motor, the metal motor mount that gets attached to the plastic motor mount. And this is what's missing. New cowling, new motor, new prop. Somewhere under there's a prop mount. Not sure where it went. I think it's under the fuselage somewhere. But I have almost everything I need to put this thing back together. So we'll be looking at putting the ESC back in here, the receiver back there, the servo female receptacles here. I'm going to try to find a different place to mount that GPS other than right there on the back of the fuselage, somewhere is hidden. And back here, the horizontal stabilizer and elevators. And the control rods that go through, they just feed through the fuselage. It's a relatively simple process. This will, like I said, it will be labor intensive, but not difficult at all, just one piece at a time. So I'm going to start the demo process from the old fuselage and bring all the parts over here, and we'll talk about putting them all back together. Here's step one. We've got the ESC is out, the receiver is out, and I forgot to mention the landing gear, of course, which involves quite a few screws. Landing gear mounts are now out, stripped off, and I've got the new fuselage up here in a stand for the build. Next up, servos, some wiring, and the horizontal stabilizer. Coming back, here we are. We have control rods out. We've got our servos all cleaned up. Landing gears off, including the mounts. Elevators off. GPS is out. And we're ready to start reassembly. Now the reassembly order is obviously a little bit arbitrary, but I think for purposes of getting this thing rebuilt on its stand back here, I'm going to leave the landing gear off to the last. Start at the front, put the motor on, hook up the ESC, go back to the receiver, hook up the servos, and then put the tail on last. Put the tail on last because those rods have to go through tubes back there. Might as well leave that to the last thing. So far, let's see, we started this at about 3:30 local time. It is now 4:06 local time. So not too bad, but it's always easy to demo than it is to put it all back together. So let's see how long it takes. Here we are, the motor mount is ready to put back on the airplane now. Notice that I have the wires coming off the top so that they'll clear the plastic motor mount, and I use blue Loctite, which you obviously can't use on plastic but works just fine when you got metal to metal. So let's go put the motor mount on and hook up the ESC. Motor is now mounted. Took the wires over the top so that I can get as much cooling air as possible through that vent in the bottom. Strapped them on so that they won't have any possibility of contacting that motor. And then I've got them bundled back there too. So next up, we're going to put the cowling on. Okay, well, it all fit back together. Got the cowling on. The hatch fits. And all the wiring is inside where it needs to be for us to hook up our receiver. But I'm pretty much out of time for today, so we're going to drop it here. Obviously still have a lot of work to do. It's now been about an hour and a half since I started to get to this point. Now it's probably going to be another hour and a half or 2 hours by the time we get everything put back together, all the controls adjusted, and ready to fly. Fortunately, it's already bound, so I won't have to rebind it. For the final steps, the first thing I want to do is to make sure that all this wiring is hooked up correctly before I go glue anything in place. So I have hooked up a battery to the ESC, powered up the transmitter, made sure actually that the binding was correct, and we're going to try out all of the servos and the motor. I've taken the prop off, try out that motor and see if it's actually working correctly. So here we go. Ailerons, flaps, and just get one wing hooked up, but I assume the other one will work. We've got, let's see, rudder, oh, that's the other one, okay. Rudder and elevator servos, and those are labeled. So let's see here. Elevator servo is moving. Rudder servo is moving. Throttle cut off. Motor doesn't sound real good. May wind up replacing that. I think I have a new one on the way, should be here tomorrow. Other thing is, the lights are correct. Flashing lights are flashing. The cowling light is steady. All the lights are working. And I think I'm ready to start gluing this stuff in place. I mounted the GPS unit here. It had been mounted back here on the old one. I've got a couple of other models. I've done similar mountings right under the wing and found out that sure enough GPS signals coming in at the frequency that they're coming in at just go basically right through foam. So I think this mounting position is going to work just fine. So I'm going to heat up the glue gun and start gluing things in place. I'm going to tie all these wires up with some wire ties as best I can to eliminate some of the wiring issues back here when all these wires stuff back here by these servos makes me a little bit nervous. But so I've got the wires all hooked up. And by the way, if you ever have to do this, these control surface wires are not the same length. If you get them in backwards, it'll be obvious though, because if you put the short one in the wrong place, the end of it's going to be back here, so you won't even be able to hook it up to the servo. And then we'll put the landing gear on. Oops, that didn't sound good. Oh, I see it. And we'll be done. Finished. And we'll be ready to center up all the controls and take it out and test fly it. Now here it is, pretty much finished. I did put a couple of Velcro strips on the fuselage to hold the battery straps open. 637T is mounted in there with Velcro, antennas positioned for the factory. GPS is mounted, and the wing cabling is in the back, and we have all of that wiring strapped, stuffed in the back out of the way of those servo arms. And all I've got to do now is one last true up of the elevator and rudder, check the wings when I get them on, and go fly it. Although I may have a new motor coming tomorrow or the next day, we'll see. Not the next day, it's Sunday. So there it is. The whole thing took about 4.5, 5 hours. Not counting some of the fumbling around time and a little bit of redo work that I had to do. Can't wait to fly it again. Next week, we'll have this thing in the air, probably on July the 4th at the annual club picnic. Have a great summer, and I'll talk to you again soon. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.